can feel it, then it means that I've messed up technically.
Maybe what I can do here is I'm not going to name any names, but I'm just going to kind of like maybe kind of summarize a couple of people's comments and give everyone a chance maybe to respond. So here's one here. It says, while Rob is repositioning his neck, he's not breaking his own structure, but facilitating a cleaner ground path, in my opinion. If you look at his lower back, I think you'll see it's a trick that could result in a postural adjustment, for example, lessening of the aortic curve. You know, another one is, moves his chin to generate a leverage principle. By doing so, he breaks his structure, and someone who's a good listener could take advantage of it.
No.
I think that's actually kind of an interesting comment. The reason I say that is, when we're doing these things and making these adjustments, how things go light or things disappear. So, I think if you haven't actually felt that sensation where like the feedback disappears, maybe that might be what you draw from it, but maybe after feeling that the fact that it disappears, you're not going to be able to listen for it.
By the way, logically, the second comment doesn't make any sense, because it's like, by the way, if somebody's a better listener, that means that they have better overall alignment, micro adjustment skills, better connectivity, et cetera, et cetera. So if they're better than me, then yes, by default, they will be able to get me. But that has nothing to do with whether or not I'm using the front, actually.
And also, you're not relying on structure here to do this.
Where were we?
Oh, just talking about structure.
Okay.
I mean, there's
Right.
Structure, aortic curve, lessening.
Yeah.
Getting taken, listening.
Okay. So actually, on about the comment about the aortic curve, I think people tend to get a little myopic, and I can understand that because I did too. Because there is, so like Art talks about this, like where you want to drop the butt. The thing is, I've also caught him with his butt with an anterior tilt. And I think there's this perception, this misguided perception, that if you have an anterior tilt, then your back must be tensed, like your lower back must be tensed. I don't, like, if you're doing dynamic movement, like you're going to go through a range of movement. And there is a, what do you call it? Like there are positions, and you'll see it a lot in like Tai Chi and stuff, in the lower positions where you do want the tailbone to be dropped and that butt to kind of like roll under. Yes. But I don't think that should be the be all and end all. Like if you actually do any kind of like dynamic movement sparring or anything, it's like, that's not the only position you're going to be in. So it's just, so Art's actually made a good point. He's like, when you're standing up and your legs are more straight, it's better to use not the tanden, but the chest tanden here for control. And then when your posture tends to drop lower, then the control goes down to the dantian, the tanden, to the tanden area. And I mean, just throwing it out there, but I mean, I know like the Chen Tai Chi people are like wonderful exponents of like, their form of grappling, et cetera, et cetera. Most of it is predisposed to having this lower posture. Yeah, I do remember when they tried to get into kickboxing, they were terrible at it. And I remember when they hired a Muay Thai coach, I think, because they were trying to get into it. And I watched some of their exponents. And the thing is, it's weird to see because they have this whole body connectivity, which points like, they're fascial driven. That like they have some like that waist development, that kind of like, hara development, etc. But they're terrible at kickboxing. So that to me points that, well, then like just having the control at the hara is not necessarily the be all and end all. And you actually have to be able to shift your control depending on the situation.
Now, let me maybe highlight another comment. I'm just going to kind of summarize this one. Basically, someone's saying they're kind of conflating Jin and Ki.
Oh, right.
Right. You know, being on the structure side, pulls down the front and the like. How exactly would you respond to that one, Rob? I mean, I think the fact when we're talking about the front, you don't have, unlike the back, right? The back, you have your spine. You have a you know, a series of bones that are going all the way down across the back that can conduct force, can move, so on and so forth. Whereas the front, you have, you know, down to about the sternum, you have, you know, bones, and then you have a big open area where you don't have that physical, well, I mean, there's a physical connection, but you don't have the bones to conduct a force through there or manipulate. How would you kind of like say your explanations or what we're talking about with respect to a center line would feed into that kind of model?
Am I conflating Jin and Qi? Well, first off, I'm not even talking about it within terms of Jin and Qi, so I don't really understand like why he's like getting his panties up in a bunch over it. But then that certain individual tends to get his panties up in a bunch about a lot of stuff. But okay, so here's something interesting to consider. I am only, in that video, I'm only talking about, I guess, what they would refer to as the front channel. And when I'm talking about this particular effect in the front channel, I'm actually disregarding, I guess, what you would call pure Jin, or maybe like central equilibrium and being able to pass it all the way down to the feet unbroken. As in, if I use the front channel, it'll naturally pass down to the feet, but it's going to be kind of dirty. And so I'm almost exclusively focusing on what are the effects when you isolate the front channel, when you use it. What happens to your body? What does it do? What happens to the opponent? In fact, Akazawa Sensei has also pointed out, actually, he pointed out to Alex. So Alex we were doing a private with Akazawa Sensei. Alex touched Akazawa Sensei. And so Akazawa Sensei like exhibits like a force to Alex. So Alex then uses the front channel to absorb it, but then he got stuck. To which Akazawa Sensei replied, see, if you only use the front channel to absorb, then eventually you get stuck because you have nowhere else. Like if you keep on absorbing, there's only so much your body can make micro adjustments before you get stuck. So you do not want to use your front channel at the expense of giving up your, what I refer to as central equilibrium, your virtual front line, precarious balance, however you want to term it, pure Jin or whatever, right? Which is something that I do mention at the seminar. But again, I separate them into parts and then tie them together and show them how they work together as a whole, like towards the end of the day. Because otherwise, like, it's too many things to keep track of. Also, I know that, like, say, like the model favored in 6H is like, well, you get your pure Jin, so you balance everything at the feet, and you get your connectivity, right, by using through the superficial fascia, et cetera, and then everything else will, take care of itself. Except I follow that model, and I can see the same results, say that like a certain individual is getting. Like I was able to get those similar results, but when it came to Akazawa Sensei, I still got jammed. So to me, that was indicative that something was missing. That was missing something, So there is I think there is a what do you call, like an assumption that, okay, so I say front channel and they say front channel, so we're talking about the same thing. It's like we're talking physiologically about the same thing, but the usage is different, for sure. because a lot of times what they're talking about is like a pull, just like a pull on the front. Like one way that that say like Mike Sigmund is showing, he showed me, was the one where you stretch the front channel like this. So once you stretch it, then you can use the elastic snap to bring it down. You use that together with the reverse breath. I'm not going to go into the details, but this usage of stretching it versus sequentially moving the joints along the front channel it's different. It's completely different.
But, you know, maybe we'll touch on this later. You know, to even get that kind of stretch down the front, you don't have to do the way that Mike demonstrates, right?
No.
I mean, when you've gotten, you know, you walk someone through it, and you've done the you know, the basic neck, tailbone, heel orientation, you get a similar feeling of a stretch right down the front of the body.
Yes, you can. Yeah. Yes. Now, by the way, this one that he shows like this, where he basically, he doesn't quite bend backwards, but the idea is that, you know, if you have a balloon man, the balloon man analogy, and you're stretching the front so that like your t-shirt is taut and there's no wrinkles, that's, I think, he's even said that's more aimed at conditioning the front as opposed to a usage. And then within that particular Chinese model that he's based it off of, a lot of it is just based off of storm release or a power model. Whereas we're not concerned so much with power, but we're actually more concerned with deceiving the opponent's brain as to whether or not we're exhibiting power, you know, which is, I think, a huge difference. That's not a value judgment statement, by the way. It's just the strategy in terms of the engagement is different. As soon as I touch somebody, I don't actually want to give them any information as to what I'm doing. I don't want them to feel the ground, right? I don't want them to feel my hara or whatever. If they can feel it, then it means that I've messed up, technically. And by the way, I say feel. That doesn't mean that it's not connected all the way down to my feet. It is, but they can't perceive it.
So